I was blessed to have met an old man when I was first beginning my journey, and his name was Jose de Kreft, and he was 92 when I met him, and he introduced me to this thing called direct carving, and he introduced me to the fact that there is nothing in the universe that's inanimate. It's whether or not we have the willingness, the courage, the capacity to find a common language that will allow us to understand that there isn't anything that's inanimate. So he gave me some techniques that would allow me to establish rapport with the stone or the wood that I was working on. And wood, of course, by its nature is not as dense, and so it's a language that's closer to the language that I speak or that we speak. And so in grains or in the color of the wood or whatnot, there's an ease of, it's easier to establish rapport with a piece of wood. Stone, because it is so much denser, is harder. So you have to work at it more, and you have to acknowledge it as an entity. One of the ways that I still sometimes acknowledge a piece of stone before I begin working on it is that I'll sit with it. I sometimes play a flute or a harmonica, and I'll play some sounds that come out, and then I begin a journey of what's called facing the stone. And stones normally come from a quarry, and so they've been impacted by man, by saws and by dynamite and by different things that extract them from the walls or the depths of the quarry. And so the first task is to eliminate the impact man has had on the stone. And you do that with, and to conduct a dialogue with stone requires that we not use power tools, because power tools have an RPM vibration or frequency to it that is generally greater even than the frequency that we deal with on a normal basis. So if you use power tools, you go further away from the material that you're working with instead of closer to. So by hand, you can generally begin with what's called a point chisel, a single pointed chisel. And if somebody has helped you, they help you to change the angle of the point so that it doesn't penetrate too far into the stone and destroy too much of it. So instead of the spire of a church steeple, you turn it into a kind of pyramid shape so that it's not as pointy and doesn't go in as deep. And then you just begin pointing the surface of the stone. It's called facing the stone, taking the face of the stone away, until it begins to be more organic. It begins to absorb light. And eventually when the corners and the edges are gone, and it begins to be more organic in its shape, you keep doing that. You go around it hundreds and hundreds of times. And what Jose used to say is that every time you hit the stone, a point of information about the stone flows through the chisel to you. So that eventually, when you've done that enough, it's like you've created a matrix of the stone inside of you. And at some point, when you've surrendered to the process and you've acknowledged the reality of the stone, and you've acknowledged that you're in a dialogue to discover something rather than to impose something on it, then eventually that stone will literally start communicating. Sometimes you'll start to get feelings in your body, like a desire to turn or twist or dip or lift up or something. Now you can go right past all of those, as people that work with pneumatic tools do, because the thing is vibrating so much and it's making so much noise. How the hell can you pay attention to anything, you know? Plus stone chips are flying everywhere and dust and all the rest of it. When you're carving by hand, it's a whole different experience. Periodically you get a hose and you wet the stone and you see veins in it, or you see little flickers of light or something. So sometimes it's that movement that you feel. Sometimes the stone will literally open and show you something. Part of a face, a shoulder, or something. And if you're willing, if you first of all, if you believe, if you're engaged in the process and you're willing, then you go right for it. You know, it's like a window opens, and if you don't go right for it, the window closes again. When you see something, you go for it. And then when you go for it, that's like pulling the thread on the sweater, and all of a sudden the relationship begins to open and unravel. And then the next stage happens when you've done something and it's ugly. I mean, it's just butt ugly. You know, it's stiff, it's crude, it's whatnot. And then you have to decide whether or not you have the courage to admit what you don't know, what you still need to learn, and to continue carving through the ugliness until you start to get to beauty. And there are times where I've gotten to a place in the carving of a stone and I've thought, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I'll never do it, because what I started to see was so beautiful, and what I'm looking at is still so cumbersome, you know? And so there have been times where I've taken a break, a month or two. I've left the stone off to the side, and then one day I'll be walking past it and I'll get a hit again, you know? I'll get an impulse or something. And if I go back to it and work it, then the pieces that you've seen that are, you know, come out. And when they start to come out, they're like prayers. I mean, they just, even with clay, when the clay starts coming to life and you see the shape or the image or whatever materializing, it's like a miracle, you know? And no matter how many times it happens, at that point, it is as though the piece of clay, of stone, of wood, or whatever it is, says, I'm independent of you. I'm alive. And then you have to try not to screw it up, you know, because it's no longer your creation. It really has become a collaborative event, a collaborative circumstance. And for artists that have never experienced that, I could not encourage them more to try it. Try looking at that blank canvas or sheet music or the keys of a board or strings on a guitar, and stop thinking about what you have to do and start asking, what can we do together? You know? Yeah.